Hey developers, picture this. You only have 30 minutes and you need to create a fully functional CRUD backend. In this video, we're gonna deep dive into Nest.js. I have a guest speaker on, Marius, who's gonna go ahead and show you all about this. So make sure you check out his channel and yeah, go ahead and take it away, Marius.
Hey developers, how's it going? My name is Marius. Eric was kind enough to have me as a guest on his channel. A little bit about myself, I'm a full stack software engineer. I do a lot of work in the JavaScript ecosystem, and I also have a channel of my own, pretty small, fairly new. You can see I just have a few videos out there, but definitely check it out if you want to see more of my content. Maybe if you like this video, just search for my name, Marius Espejo, on YouTube. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. So when Eric approached me to be a guest on his channel, I was thinking about what value can I provide to his audience. And I was thinking that about a week ago, he gave an intro to Nest.js, which was a pretty good intro, but it definitely only scratches the surface of what it can empower you to do. So what I thought that I could do for this video is I can show you sort of what happens when you put in the time to really learn this framework. How productive can you be in terms of creating a backend, CRUD API. So to make things a little bit more fun, I pulled up a 30-minute timer here, and I thought that I could showcase you guys what can I achieve in 30 minutes or less. Can I build a fully working CRUD API that saves to a database and does your typical create, read, update, delete. All right, so I'm gonna hit start here, and I should see it starting to come down, so we should get going. First thing I'm gonna do is pull up a Visual Studio Code window with a terminal, and I'm just gonna do npm install -g at nestjs/CLI. So this CLI is what we use to make new Nest.js applications, and it's got a couple other things that it can do for us that I'll show in a little bit here. But once you have that installed, you just go into wherever you want to create a new project, and then you simply do nest new and then provide a name. In this case, I'll just call it CRUD API. Next thing it's going to do is going to ask me what package manager do I want to use. I'll just stick with npm because I have that installed. And then it's going to spend a little bit of time installing some dependencies for us. All right, so eventually that completes. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull up the newly generated application in VS Code itself. So I'm going to do code CRUD API, which should open us a new window with a code, a newly generated code. So let's take a look at what's in here. So you should have seen a little bit of an intro to this in Eric's previous video, but you'll notice that we just have a basic controller that when we go to it, it should give us a hello world message. So let's take a look at that. Let's first run the application. Let's go to the terminal. The way you run this is by running npm run start dev. And while that's spinning up, I'm going to go to Thunder Client here, which is a really nice extension that you can use to think of it as sort of like an alternative to Postman. So I'm just going to do a new request, and I'm going to go to HTTP localhost 3000. When I hit send there, we get back our hello world, right? So it's working, it's running. We should be able to start building from here. All right, so I said that we're going to try and build some kind of CRUD API. I'm thinking that maybe we could create an API for a blog, right? Maybe a blog has a list of posts, and you're able to create, read, update, delete those posts. So what I'm going to do to kind of get us there as quick as possible is utilize the Nest CLI to generate some stuff for us. So you can do nest g resource, and in the name of your resource, I'm going to call this posts. And then it's going to give me a couple different options here. I'm going to select REST API, and then should I generate CRUD endpoints, I'll say yes. You'll see that it created a bunch of new files for me and then installed a couple of new packages. Let's take a look. So we've got this new posts, which has its own post controller. You can see that it has a post, it has a get by ID, and it's got a patch for updating, and it's got delete. So it's got the bones of a CRUD, but it doesn't have the actual implementation in it yet. So for example, if we go to get/posts, which you can see what the path for the endpoint will be up here, which I think Eric showed in his previous video, you'll see that it'll do post service find all, and all that does right now is gives you a string. So it doesn't have the underlying implementation. But let's take a look and test that real quick. So I'm going to go back to my Thunder client here. I'm just going to do a get on /posts, hit send, and you'll see that it provides us a string that says the action returns all posts. And if I switch this to the other HTTP verbs, let's do a post on posts, it'll say that this action adds a new post. And similarly, if we do let's do a delete on, if we were to have a number IDs, it'll say this action removes a number 1 post. If I do a get there, it's going to say this action returns a number 1 post. So already, and how much time do we have so far? We're 24 minutes left. So we've already spent a little bit over 5 minutes, but we already have the bones, right? We've got the bones of a CRUD API in place. We just need to add a little bit more to it. All right, so what do we have to do from here? So I'm going to go to terminal. So in the terminal, I'm going to do npm install at nestjs/typeorm, typeorm itself, and then some kind of database driver. I'm going to use SQLite in this case. And I got a little bit of typo here, typeorm, and I'll hit enter. So what are these things? So typeorm is, I would say, one of the more mature ORMs that you can use in a Node.js application, specifically as well if you're trying to do it in TypeScript. And then SQLite is just think of it as kind of a dummy in-memory database that we can use for tutorials like this without doing too much setup, right? So it's going to simulate to us, it's going to simulate a semi-realistic database that allows us to do SQL queries off of it, and basically emulates a somewhat real enough database. So we just installed a bunch of stuff. Where do we go from there? First thing you're going to do to kind of set up a database connection is you go into your app module. This is sort of the root of your the root module of your application. What we're going to add here is an import called typeorm module dot for root. And what this requires, you'll see, is an options object. And usually this options object is the connection details that you need to connect to your database. So for example, if you maybe had a MySQL or Postgres database, this would include your login information, like your username and password and stuff like that. Now we're using SQLite. What I like to do is I like to bring in the type definition for the connection options of the specific database that I'm using. So in this case, I'm going to try to pull in SQLite connection options, and that's going to give me an idea of what do I need to put in this object, right? Even though I'm not looking at any documentation right now, I do have a high level understanding of what I need to provide here, but it's also going to give me some hints. So for example, it's going to tell me that you need to provide a type here and a database. So we're going to do type SQLite, and then database is actually the name of the file name and specifically where you want that file to be saved. And I'm just going to save that in my desktop, and I'll call it DB. And then I know that from experience, I also need to define an entities array here so that it can tell what entities do I want saved in my database. In this case, part of the generated code that we had earlier in the posts is you'll see that there's an entities folder in here that includes a post entity. So we're going to import that and add it here, and we'll add a little bit more to that code in a little bit. So I'm going to add post, and make sure to import this one specifically, the one coming from our entities folder, because there are other stuff here that's also code posts, so like the HTTP post, so don't get that mixed up. And then finally, the other thing I'm going to add here is synchronize. So real quick about what synchronize is, you can kind of pause the screen here and read what it does. But basically what it does is as we add new entities to our code, it'll automatically add it to our database, right? So it's kind of like automatic migration. This is definitely only meant for development. You should not be doing this in production, right? So you can see it'll say that it's going to try to match the schema that we define in code with the database automatically. All right, so we've got our basic SQLite connection options here. I'm going to provide that in typeorm module for root. Now, once we have our database connection established, I'm going to move into our posts module, and what I need to add in here is a type ORM module.forFeature, and this also takes in an array of entities. So again, we need to put our post entity in here. Now it's giving me the squiggly lines because it doesn't recognize that post is an actual entity. So that's the next step for us. Right now, it's kind of just a basic class, right? The code doesn't know that this is meant to represent a table in our database. So the way we do that is by giving this a new decorator called entity. And within the class itself, we can start defining the fields that our table has, the columns. So typically you'd probably have an ID. Let's have a number ID, an integer ID, and then probably a, let's say that we have a title column, which is a string. In a database, that's going to be a varchar. So the way we tell type ORM what we want these columns to be in terms of database types is via decorators as well. So I'm going to add primary generated column here, which really what this does is it says it's going to be an auto incrementing integer. And then for title, I'm just going to add column, which it's just going to automatically infer that, oh, this is a string, then I guess you want a varchar. Actually, I made a typo here. This is supposed to be in the imports array. So that's what happens when you try to build these things quickly. So I'm going to move this guy into imports here. Fix that up. And now our initial database configuration is all set. Let's take a look at our time. So we've got 15 minutes left. Let's see if we can build out the actual CRUD implementation, right? So our goal is to talk to the database and actually be able to add our new posts to it. We want to be able to create, read, update, delete, right? So you might be wondering, what was this forFeature thing for? What that enables us to do is, if I go into the post service, is I can add a controller in here, or sorry, I can add a constructor. And the way that Nest.js works is it revolves around dependency injection. So it kind of wires things up automatically for you based on sort of what you provide to the constructor. So for example, if I were to say inject repository here, and it's going to ask me what entity do you want to be injected. So I want to inject my post entity, and then we're just going to define a posts repository member in our class, which has a type of repository post, right? So, and what is that, right? So post repository, just think of it as it's sort of the interface that type ORM provides to us to enable us to make database queries. So let's take a look at putting in the actual implementation that we have to have in place to start talking to actually start saving data and reading data from the database. So let's actually start with a find all here. I'm going to replace this with this.post repository.find. Very simple. That's going to do a sort of a select star from our posts table. And again, remember that our post entity, once we've turned it into a post entity and we've notified the application to say that that's an entity for our database, the synchronize is automatically going to create that table in our database. And then again, the repository allows us to kind of do queries against it. So let's take a look at what we have in the Thunder client so far. If we were to go back and do our get/posts, hit send here, and it gives us back an empty array because we don't have any data yet. So it's sort of working already, but we need to actually put data in here to kind of further prove this out. So what I'm going to do is implement create. And real quick before we do this, you'll notice that it's already taking in a create post DTO, which was generated for us from the CLI command earlier. So within create post DTO, I need to define the fields that I want in there in my data transfer object, the DTO. So I want to be able to define a title on create, which is just a string, right? We said that our entity has a title, so we need to be able to create a post with a title, and the ID is going to be generated for us, so we don't have to worry about that. So the way you create or basically insert, how to do database inserts with the repository is you can just let's do new post equals this.post repository.create, and then you pass in your DTO in here. And the create itself doesn't actually do the actual insert in the table yet. All that does is kind of creates an instance of the post entity class, but we still need to actually save it in our database to perform an insert. So to do that, we're gonna do create post repository dot save, and we're gonna pass in the new post object in here. So this is new post is really an instance of the post entity class that we have. Real quick time check, we got 10 minutes left. Let's see if we can wrap this up. So we want to be able to add two posts. We said that our body takes in a DTO of title. So let's do I am a new post, and let me just hit send there. So it responds back with the newly inserted row in our table, which has a title, which we just passed in here, and a new generated auto incrementing ID, right? And also notice that it automatically assumes that if you do a post, that you probably want a status 201 to come back. So that's another nice thing with Nest, is it seems to have a good set of fundamentals that's automatically configured for you. Let's add a couple more posts in here just for demo purposes. So I'll do I am a new post 2, and I'm a new post 3 and 4. And then let's go back to our get just to prove that now we should have 4 items in here. So you'll see that our response is 200 OK, and we got 4 items on the right. Great. So we've got how much time? 9 minutes. All right, we got to finish up here. What do we have left? So we need to implement find one. So how do you do that? You see that it's already passing in the ID for us. If we take a look at the controller, the post controller, you'll see that it's automatically extracting the ID parameter from the URL, from the request for us, and then passing that down to the service. So all the service needs to do is take that ID and perform the necessary query to pull out that specific object, that specific row from our database. And how do you do that? It's pretty simple. You just do this.post repository.find one, right? And that takes in an ID. So we just pass it in, and that's gonna return, well, let me just show you. So if I go back to my Thunder client here, if I were to do a get slash post slash the ID, so let's do 1 here, it returns back that object, that post with the ID 1. And let's do 3 just to test it out, and it returns I am a new post 3. All right, so what's next? We have a patch here which allows us to do updates. So kind of similar thing, you'll see that it has an update post DTO, and it automatically kind of extends from the create post DTO, so we don't really need to add anything here. So this automatically has a title property to it. So if we go back into our post service to implement that, similar thing, we've got the ID being passed in, and then the DTO being passed in, which includes title. So the way you do updates with TypeORM and the repository API is that first you need to look up the post. So you need to query it. And how do you do that? Well, we already have our find one here, right? We can just sort of utilize it, pass in the ID, and I need to make this async so I can use the await keyword here. So that's gonna query that specific post with that ID. And then to do an update, I just kind of do a mutation here. I'm gonna do post.title equals update post.tto.title. Now that mutation hasn't actually saved to the database yet. So again, how do you save it? You just do this.post repository.save, and then we pass in our mutated object. And when you save, it's going to return back to us the actual saved updated record. So let's take a look on, so we're on post/3 here with ID 3. I want to update the title here. So I'm going to do a JSON body with title. Let's just do Eric is so cool, right? Thanks for having me on your channel. We'll switch to a patch here because that's what our controller requires, and we'll hit send. And it gives us back a 200 OK with the updated object. And if we do a get, just to kind of show, you know, it's definitely working. I can do a get of everything. You'll see that the third object here has an updated title. So we're almost done, and let's see our time. 5 minutes to spare to implement delete. I can do that. So this one should be pretty simple. Again, similar thing, we're getting the ID in. The way you can do deletes in TypeORM is you can simply do this.post repository.delete, and then you can pass in the ID like so. There's a one downside to this, which you can see the return result of this is delete result, not the actual deleted object, right? It kind of gives you the result, but not the object that you deleted. So a way around that is to kind of do a similar pattern that we're doing here. Is we'll do a find one, we'll find the post, and then just async, and then instead of doing delete, we're gonna do remove and pass in the found entity, right? And remove does the same thing as delete, but it also returns the object that got deleted. All right, so finally back in our Thunder client, we're gonna do, let's try to delete one of these guys. Let's delete number 4 here. So if I were to do /4 and go to delete, hit send, status 200, and then it returns me the object, the row that got deleted. And just to prove to you guys that again this is working, if I go and query /posts again with an HTTP GET, I get back 200, and now we only have 3 items in our array. And with that, we got a fully implemented working CRUD API, right? We can do create, we can insert new posts, we can read, we can get all of the posts, or we can get by ID. We can do updates, and we can do deletes, right? And I did that in less than 30 minutes with roughly 2 minutes to spare. And of course, this is a pretty simplistic example, right? We're just doing titles. We're not doing validation and stuff like that. But this just shows you how productive you can be once you know a lot about not only Nest.js, but TypeORM, right? I don't think I wrote a lot of code here. And the CLI kind of helped generated a couple of things for us. So comparing with something like Express, right? It kind of comes with architecture out of the box, and it gives you sort of almost everything that you need. It tells you that, hey, you should do your DTOs like this. You should put your business logic in services, and then you should define your routes and controllers. So with about a minute to spare, I just hit stop there. This pretty much ends our video here. I hope that you guys enjoyed having me as a guest on Eric's channel. That wasn't really much of a tutorial because I was kind of showcasing you guys, the productivity that you can have if you really know the Nest framework very well. But if you do want to learn more, if you want to learn the fundamentals of being able to do the stuff that I'm doing in this kind of very quick, productive way, definitely go and check out my channel. Just search for my name, Maris Espejo, and you'll see a bunch of Nest.js content in there. Nest is, I would say, probably half of the content that I do, but I definitely want to expand to other frameworks, other Node frameworks, and a lot of front-end stuff as well, if that's more of your jam. Anyways, guys, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much, Eric, for having me on your channel. And I'd love to hear any comments that you guys might have. Would love to hear from you. And of course, make sure to subscribe to Eric's channel and hit that like button. And I'm sure he'll probably tell you to do the same thing. And that's it. Have a good day, and thank you.